Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Okay, hello everyone. It's Tuesday, April 29th, 2025. Let's kick off with a quick look at the weather. We're seeing forecasts for heavy, maybe even excessive rainfall and some severe thunderstorms. That's moving from parts of North Texas into the Ozarks today and carrying into Wednesday. There's also a risk, a pretty serious one, of locally catastrophic flooding, particularly down in southwest Oklahoma, so definitely be aware if you're in that area.
And elsewhere.
Elsewhere, yeah. Expect some scattered severe thunderstorms. That's stretching from the lower Great Lakes down to the southern High Plains, mostly this afternoon and evening.
Got it. And any good news weather-wise?
Well, if you're out in Sacramento, it looks like a nice day for you. Sunny, with a high expected around 83 Fahrenheit.
All right. And turning to the markets, how did things close yesterday?
Pretty positive, actually. The Dow Jones Industrial Average finished up 0.59%, closing at 40,464.59.
And the S&P?
The S&P 500 also saw gains of 0.21%, ending the day at 5540.19.
So, a solid performance there.
So welcome everyone to Connecting the Dots. We're part of Snarful Solutions Group, and today, like always, we're going to dig into three key tech news stories that caught our eye.
Right. The goal is to unpack them a bit and see how they connect, to everyday life. What's the real relevance for you?
Exactly. So let's jump right in. First up, there's significant movement on a piece of legislation in Washington.
Yes, the Take I Down Act. The U.S. House just passed it. This is pretty big news.
It really is. So what's the core idea behind this act?
Well, it essentially aims to criminalize posting non-consensual sexual images online. And importantly, this specifically includes deepfakes, those AI-generated images we hear so much about.
The deepfake angle is crucial, and it also requires platforms to remove this kind of content.
That's right. They have to take it down when requested by the victim.
Okay. And how did the vote go in the House?
Overwhelmingly supportive. It passed 409 to 2 on Monday night. That's quite a margin.
Wow. And the Senate had already passed it.
Yeah, they passed it unanimously before it even got to the House. Getting that kind of bipartisan agreement, especially on tech-related issues, is, well, it's pretty remarkable these days.
It really is. Who are the main players pushing for this? I heard Melania Trump was involved.
Yes, she was a key backer. In the Senate, the sponsors were Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, and Amy Klobuchar, a Democrat from Minnesota.
Okay, so bipartisan sponsorship there too.
Definitely. And in the House, it was led by Representatives Maria Salazar, a Republican from Florida, and Madeleine Dean, a Democrat from Pennsylvania.
And I think Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, was also on board. He attended that roundtable with Melania Trump, I believe.
Correct. He supported it. Melania Trump put out a statement thanking Congress, emphasizing, protecting kids' dignity, privacy, and safety online. She did sort of gently note the absence of more Democratic leaders at her roundtable, though.
Interesting. And what did Khanna say about it?
He described it pretty straightforwardly as a common-sense bill that keeps people safe, and basically said this shouldn't be about politics.
Makes sense. So let's get into the specifics. What does the bill actually do?
Okay, so it makes it a federal crime to publish, or even just threaten to publish, non-consensual intimate imagery.
And that explicitly covers the AI digital forgeries.
Yes, that's specifically included. And a really practical part is the timeline for platforms, social media sites, and the like have 48 hours to remove images once they get a request.
48 hours, that's a clear deadline. What about penalties?
They're significant. If someone actually shares these non-consensual images, they could face up to 3 years in prison.
Okay.
For the threat offenses, it depends on the victim's age. Up to 2.5 years if it involves a minor, and up to 1.5 years for threats involving adults.
Right. And wasn't there a specific case that really highlighted the need for this?
Yes. The story of Elliston Berry was a major catalyst. She was only 14 when an AI-generated non-consensual graphic image of her appeared online.
And Snapchat wouldn't take it down.
Reportedly, they refused for almost a year. Imagine going through that.
That's awful. What did she say about the experience?
She described feeling, understandably, shocked, violated, and unsafe. She expressed hope that this new law means others won't have to face that kind of situation without any legal recourse.
A powerful motivator for the legislation. Who are the two no votes in the House?
That was Representatives Thomas Massie, Republican from Kentucky, and Eric Burleson, Republican from Missouri.
Okay. So, bringing this back to our listeners, what's the bottom line? How does this impact everyday life?
Well, I think for anyone concerned about online privacy, which is probably most of us, this is a potentially significant step, especially with deepfake technology getting easier to use and more convincing.
Right, the potential for misuse is scary.
Exactly. This law provides a clearer legal pathway for victims and puts more explicit responsibility on the platforms to act. It's about accountability.
But enforcement could be tricky, right, across all the different corners of the internet.
Absolutely. Enforcement will definitely be a challenge. Think about the sheer volume of content and the global nature of many platforms. It's a big step, but not a magic bullet. There will be technical and legal hurdles, for sure.
Okay, let's shift gears. Our second story involves a bit of a clash between the White House and Amazon.
Yes, this one's about tariffs and transparency. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had some strong words for Amazon.
What triggered it?
It was a report initially from Punchbowl News, citing a source, that claimed Amazon was planning to display exactly how much President Trump's recent tariffs add to the cost of each product, right there next to the price.
So showing the tariff cost explicitly. And Leavitt didn't like that idea.
Not at all. She called it a hostile and political act by Amazon.
Hostile and political. Wow. What was her reasoning?
She questioned why Amazon didn't implement something similar, say, when the Biden administration was in charge and inflation was allegedly high. She also referenced a Reader's report about Amazon supposedly partnering with the Chinese propaganda arm.
So connecting it to China as well.
Yeah, and she used it to pivot, saying this is another reason why Americans should buy American and supports bringing supply chains back home, onshoring.
Did she comment on Trump's relationship with Jeff Bezos? That's been up and down.
She declined to comment on that directly, but just doubled down, calling Amazon's reported plan a hostile and political action.
Okay. Was anyone else from the administration talking about this?
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent weighed in, too. He emphasized that bringing down Bidenflation is a top priority.
Right.
He claimed things like interest rates, mortgage rates, gas, and energy prices are actually coming down.
Yeah.
And he argued that deregulation, which he says the administration is pursuing, acts like a hidden tax cut, and its effects should start kicking in later this year, Q3, Q4.
So the administration is pushing back on the economic front. But what did Amazon say? Did they confirm this plan to show tariff costs?
Well, actually, no. Amazon denied it. A spokesperson, Tim Doyle, came out pretty clearly.
What was their statement?
He said the idea of listing import charges was only ever considered for one specific part of their business, the ultra-low-cost Amazon Hall store. And critically, he stated it was never approved and not going to happen. This was in response not just to Punchbowl, but other outlets like CNBC and the New York Post asking about it.
So Amazon says it's not happening. But the underlying issue of tariffs impacting prices is still real, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Trump's tariffs on China, reported at 145% in some cases, are huge. That's bound to affect a company like Amazon, where something like 60% of sales reportedly come from smaller, independent sellers, many of whom rely heavily on imports.
Yeah, those tariffs have to show up somewhere. Are we actually seeing price increases on Amazon already?
There are reports suggesting yes. Data indicates nearly 1,000 products on Amazon have seen prices go up since mid-April, coinciding with the tariff discussions.
1,000 products. And how much are prices jumping?
The average increase reported is close to 30%. That's hitting all sorts of goods, from like phone chargers and electronics accessories to apparel. Some major brands, like Anchor, have apparently raised prices on a lot of their listings.
Wow, 30% is significant. Is there confirmation this is directly due to tariffs?
Well, Scott Needham, who's the CEO of an analytics firm called SmartScout, observed that tariffs seem to be the main driver behind these recent hikes. It's hard to pin down causation perfectly, but the timing and scale strongly suggest it.
So even if Amazon doesn't put a label on it saying tariff cost, you're probably paying for it anyway.
That seems to be the reality. At the end of the day, whether it's explicitly shown or just baked into the price, tariffs often get passed along to the consumer. That's the core economic principle here.
It's interesting, though, because I also saw reports that Trump himself recently spoke quite positively about Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, that relationship has certainly had its twists and turns. Trump reportedly praised Bezos recently, saying he's been great and acknowledging a higher level of respect, even crediting Bezos for aligning Amazon's policies more with his administration's values. So, a bit of mixed messaging, perhaps.
Definitely complex. So, for you listening, what's the main takeaway here?
I think it highlights how much trade policy, like these tariffs, can directly hit your wallet when you're shopping online. This whole debate over whether to display the cost just shines a light on that underlying economic impact.
And it might make people think more about where products come from, potentially boosting that Buy American push leave it mention.
It could, yeah. It raises awareness about supply chains and the costs associated with imported goods. It might influence some purchasing decisions, absolutely.
Okay, let's move to our third and final story for today. This one involves Ed Martin and his time as the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia.
Right, and this has generated quite a bit of controversy. The reports focus on his actions during that tenure.
What's the main point of contention? His background.
Well, partly, yes. Martin is known more as a political operative. He was appointed to this really important legal role, the top federal prosecutor for D.C. by the Trump administration, even though he reportedly had no experience as a prosecutor, never even took a case to trial, according to the reports.
No trial experience for the U.S. Attorney in D.C. That's unusual,
to say the least. And understand some of the concerns, it helps to look at some prior context, like his involvement with the Eagle Forum.
What happened there?
He was initially picked by Phyllis Schlafly to lead the conservative group, but things went sour, and he was later fired. This led to a messy legal fight with Schlafly's daughter and Schlafly Corey.
Okay, a legal battle. How does that relate?
During that case, evidence reportedly came out suggesting Martin had orchestrated online attacks against the judge presiding over the case.
Orchestrated attacks on the judge? How?
Apparently through Facebook, using a proxy, someone named Priscilla Gray. Reports indicate he ghost wrote posts critical of the judge and coached Gray on how to make them seem organic.
Wow. That sounds ethically dubious, to put it mildly.
Legal experts certainly thought so at the time, calling it unethical and potentially illegal. Martin was ultimately found in civil contempt and held liable for defamation and false light against Corey. He also apparently drafted a statement for one of Schlafly's sons attacking the judge.
Okay, so that's the background context. Now, what about his actions specifically as interim U.S. Attorney?
Well, during his time in that office, several controversial things reportedly happened. He oversaw the dismissal of some outstanding cases related to the January 6 riot.
Dismissed Jan 6 cases?
Some of them, yes. He also fired more than a dozen prosecutors from the office. And maybe most notably, he opened an investigation into the previous charging decisions made in those same Jan 6 riot cases.
So, investigating his own office's prior work on Jan 6.
That's what's reported. There were also reports of investigations being initiated into Democratic lawmakers and members of the Biden family.
Politically charged investigations?
That's certainly the allegation. Reports also mention him forcing out the chief of the criminal division because that chief apparently didn't find enough evidence for an investigation Martin wanted pursued. Anything else?
Yeah, there are also accounts of him threatening Georgetown University's law school over its diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, policies, and publicly vowing to investigate unethical conduct within the federal government generally.
Okay, so a lot of controversial moves.
Yeah.
How did the legal community react?
Not well, according to reports. Over 100 former federal prosecutors signed an open letter basically accusing him of butchering the position and turning the U.S. Attorney's Office into a political arm.
100 former prosecutors. That's a strong statement.
It is. He's also reportedly facing at least 4 disciplinary complaints with the bar associations in D.C. and Missouri. The overall picture painted is one of using the office to potentially reward allies and target perceived enemies, which aligns with some of President Trump's stated intentions about using the Justice Department.
Was there a specific initiative name-checked? Yes, something called Operation Whirlwind. It was announced as an effort to hold accountable people who threaten public officials. But part of that reportedly involved looking into past remarks made by Senator Chuck Schumer, an investigation that ultimately didn't go anywhere.
And concerns about subpoenas, too.
Right. Questions were raised about him being the sole authorizing official on a grand jury subpoena related to a case involving clean energy grants, which was seen as unusual.
No, Trump has nominated him for the permanent position, right? How's that going?
It's setting up a fight. Senate Democrats are demanding a public hearing, citing his objectionable record. Confirmation is definitely not assured.
Has Martin been fully transparent with the Senate?
That's another point of concern. He's apparently had to submit multiple supplemental letters to the Judiciary Committee to correct omissions in his background paperwork.
Omissions like what?
One notable one was initially failing to disclose numerous appearances he'd made on Russian state-owned media outlets like RT and Sputnik.
Appearing on Russian state media. That certainly raises eyebrows in this context.
It does. So the whole situation is really under intense scrutiny.
So, connecting this back for our listeners, why does this particular story matter? It feels very inside Washington.
It might seem that way, but it touches on something fundamental: the importance of ethical conduct and impartiality in positions of power, especially within the justice system.
Right. The idea that justice should be blind.
Exactly. The actions of political appointees in roles like the U.S. Attorney can have really broad implications for the rule of law and, crucially, for public trust in the entire system. When there are questions about political motivations driving investigations or prosecutions, well, that erodes faith.
So it raises questions about the integrity and fairness of federal investigations potentially affecting anyone.
Precisely. It's about ensuring the system operates based on law and evidence, not political agendas. That's something that impacts everyone, even if indirectly.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's quickly recap the 3 stories we dug into today.
Right. First, we had the Take It Down Act passing Congress, a big move aimed at tackling non-consensual intimate images online, including deepfakes.
Then we looked at that spat between the White House and Amazon over potentially displaying tariff costs and the broader impact of those tariffs on the prices you pay.
And finally, we discussed the controversies surrounding Ed Martin's tenure as interim U.S. Attorney for D.C. and the concerns raised about politicization within the Justice Department.
And you can really see the threads connecting them, can't you? Online safety, economic impacts trickling down to consumers, the functioning and trustworthiness of government institutions.
Absolutely. They all touch on how technology, policy, and politics intersect and shape different aspects of our daily lives, whether we always realize it or not.
Definitely leaves you with some things to consider about that intersection.
It certainly does. Always more to unpack.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive for today. As always, we are here to help here at Snarful, so feel free to reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.